All right, what's up, guys? Captain Chris Blanchette here from Coast to Cove Charters. I'm the Largemouth Bass Fishing Guide here on Lake Murray. I've got Captain Chip Bragg from Sea and Stripes Guide Service. He is the top-notch striper guide here on Lake Murray as well. Something that we want to go ahead and start doing on a monthly basis is doing a fishing report for the lake. Of the between the two of us, I would imagine we spend probably the most time out of anybody on Lake Murray. So being able to kind of share a little bit about what we're seeing, because we understand that people aren't on the water near as much as we are. So just being able to share some of the conditions, some of the different things that we're seeing to make you more successful whenever you go out and go fishing, because like I said, we definitely get it. And it's not something that we take for granted. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off just kind of going through, I guess, what are some of the lake conditions. So I'll kind of turn that over to Chip. He's been out there. Actually, I think he had a trip today too. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing out there.
So, September is probably my least favorite month to fish. It's a transition month. And I always tell people, so you got May, September. Those are our two transition months on my side of things. Last week we seen water temps all the way down into like 74, 75, and you're like, everybody's getting the fall bug and it's coming around. And then, of course, we had, Saturday, Sunday, and then yesterday, just 90 degrees. So guess what? Water temps back up 79, 80 degrees. I even see some 81, 82 yesterday. So it's everything's moving. Water temps are moving up and down, up and down. It's been tough. Everybody, of course, I don't want to be jumping ahead. I can go into. I'm already starting to talk about what's going on in the lake.
But you're good there for sure. I echo pretty much everything that you're saying. I had trips all weekend. Gosh, 4 or 5 days in a row there, and it was pretty much exactly what you said. September is definitely a transition time period. We had really, really high temperatures as far as water temperatures in the upper 80s. And then we had that cold snap a couple weeks ago, really dropped those water temperature into the 70s. And typically you think that's going to make the fish want to bite, but they need stability, and they need almost like, instead of a really good sharp drop, they want kind of like a constant decrease so they can kind of follow. So the fish are just confused right now. Obviously it's September, to your point. September is probably one of the more tough times of the year, especially on our side as well. Those fish don't know if they need to be in the back of pockets, if they need to be out in the middle of the lake roaming, checking out those herring, or if they need to be on the secondary points or stuff like that. So, without going too much into it yet, you just got to keep moving, right? Try and land on them and figure out exactly where they want to be.
And that's kind of what we're doing on our end. I'm not a big, run and gun type of guy. I want to go, I want to find a pattern, I want to sit on that pattern. But I went out, I guess it was Monday, just to do, if I don't have trips, I'm still on that water, just trying to stay on top of fish. And I rode, and I probably burnt, for me, I probably burnt 15 gallons of gas, and that is a ton. I know a lot of the bass guys are all over the lake. I don't. I like to run about 5 gallons, 6 gallons a day, because I know where the fish are, I know where they should be. We're going there. We're gonna go catch them. But Monday I rode, and it's just these fish are on the move. Like you said, with the water temps, and we also have usually in September. And we can go into this when they talk about the schooling fish. Everybody thinks it's just this. It's September. It's end of August. It's September. The fish are going to be schooling, but why are they schooling? And right now, the threadfin larvae is coming out off the banks. Everything in spring when they were just teeny tiny. Now they're getting up to that 1-2 inch size, and they're venturing out in that open water. And when they get in that open water, everything's just tearing them apart. Yeah. That's what's causing them to school. Is the little larvae coming out there, and it's big enough to get offshore. And we're seeing a ton of that. Go out there in the evenings, and when it's calm, you just see the huge bait pods just all over the top of the water. And again, the more the bait moves, the more the fish move. It's a tough time right now. But you got to stick to your guns and find the bait, and the fish should be there.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely tough too, as far as being able to stay consistent, right? And I mean, that's kind of the thing as far as being a guide. I mean, that's one thing you got to do, right? Is you can't just be, oh, didn't catch him today, I don't know, right? So
that's right.
that's the big thing is how do we stay consistent as guides to make sure that our clients are consistently catching those fish, even though it's one of the toughest times of the year. And from a bass side, I'll kind of just start doing a quick deep dive on bass stuff from what I'm seeing and what we've had as far as the last couple trips. So where do we start, right? There's a lot of transition stuff going on. The fish are literally scattered, but they're grouped together, which sounds super weird. But we're seeing bait pods. We're seeing the thread fin that you're talking about. The fish still want blueback herring, right? But I feel like from what I'm seeing on my end is there's a lot of those 1.5 to 2.5, maybe 3-inch thread fins everywhere. And around this time of the year on Lake Murray, the bass really kind of transition from that bigger blueback to those thread fins. Okay, so we see a lot of that, and you're going to get with that a lot of smaller fish during your catch rates, right? So I mean, for us, back in the springtime, gosh, it seems like you go out and catch a 20-pound bag almost every time you go fishing, but now it's like man, you really kind of have to work super hard to get that like 14 to 16, 17-pound range. It seems like I would say 1 out of every 5 fish we catch is probably a 2.5 to 3.5 pounder. With a lot of the fish being between 10 and 15 inches. So where am I starting, I guess, to be able to intersect with some of these bass on Lake Murray? So we're catching them between 2 and 60 feet, right? Which sounds super intimidating, but let's narrow that down a little bit. So we have rocky secondary points, and I kind of have some notes here just from the trips that I've had. We've got rocky secondary points. That's a great spot for someone who does not have like a forward-facing sonar or something like that. The fish are starting to transition. They're not fully all out on the main lake, but they're definitely not all back in the creek. So a secondary rocky point is going to be a great place to intersect one of those fish, especially if you don't have forward-facing sonar, can't go find them out in the middle of the channel. You catch them on a top water like a whopper plopper or a sexy dog, strike king, walking bait, something of that nature. Fishing shallow, covering a ton of water. You're not going to get a bunch of bites a day if you do that, but man, you can really get some good quality, and I think that's where a lot of those bigger kicker 4 and 5 pound bites would come during a tournament. So let's say you do have forward-facing sonar, and I kind of breaking it down for both types of people that would be doing it because I grew up fishing without it, and obviously it's come out, so I've used it a lot, as well. So I try and cater to both people who like it and don't like it. Those long, slow tapering points. We get a lot of that right now, too, with forward-facing sonar. You can go out, I always stop my boat in probably around that 60-foot range coming up onto that point because a lot of times with the bait fish right now, they're suspended, right? And there's a ton of bait. You see it all over LiveScope. And a lot of times you see those 2 to like 5 fish packs out there, and those fish will bite, especially at the right time of day. And if you find them where they're active and ready to go, you can catch them on a variety of baits, right? You can catch them on a top water, whether it be a smaller, like a sexy dog, again, that little strike king bait. I really like that bait, something like an evergreen top water bait, a fluke. That's also a good one. For me, whenever it's sunny out, a fluke is great, especially if there's wind, right? I like a top water when there's not a ton of wind, but there's a little bit of wind. When there's a little bit more wind, I'd say that like 5 to 10 mile an hour range. That's when I really like to throw a fluke. So that gets those fish, when they're within 10 feet, I'd say, of the surface of the water, and they'll be in 10 feet down, suspended in 60 feet of water. So I'll work my way all the way up onto the point. Cane piles always hold fish. Brush piles always hold fish. You can catch those on a finesse worm, like a filler worm or something like that. That's really how I've been kind of having like a 1-2 punch, right? If you don't have forward-facing sonar, or first thing in the morning, you can go throw that top water bait, like a buzz bait or a whopper plopper or a walking bait, like a sexy dog, up on those secondary rocky points, and then transition around 9 o'clock out to fishing offshore. I will say, for me personally, fish before 9 o'clock right now, I don't know what the reasoning is, but the fish before 9 o'clock right now are almost kind of like bonus fish, right? If you can get like 2 to 5 fish before 9, that's pretty decent. And then, between that 9 and 1 time period, right now, that's like the magic time for me. Like that's when it's going down, and we've been having some pretty good catch rates on the last 4 or 5 trips. I think we had a 3/4 day where we had 13. Then we had a full day where we had 23, and then we had another 3/4 day where we had 17. With the bulk of those catches coming between that 9 and 1 o'clock time period. Typically every day we're done by 1 o'clock or so, kind of depending upon. But this time of the year, gosh, it gets so hot in the afternoons, and the bite slows down. But that's kind of just for me, just jumping right into it as far as where I would start, where I have been starting, and like how we've been able to consistently still put some pretty dang solid numbers in the boat for Lake Murray, especially this time of the year, and what type of baits I've been using. So that's kind of your September largemouth bass report. Last thing I'd say to that, tournament wise, man, if you catch 15 to 18 pounds right now, that's really, really solid. I'm not going to say you're going to win every tournament, but man, if you have like a 2 or 3 day tournament coming up and, you get 15 to 16 pounds a day, I mean, you're going to be all over it. You're going to be pretty close. And then, if you have one really good upper teen day to go with it, I mean, you're probably going to be right there where you need to be. So from a bass side, that's where we are. Now let's transition a little bit over into what the stripers are doing and kind of how you can successfully target them, especially when they're kind of in that super pelagic mode right now.
So, and I'm gonna piggyback on the stuff you talked about there. So, we have a little bycatch. We catch our fair share of largemouth. And I'm a live bait fisherman, so we're fishing a lot of bluebacks. Gets a little colder, we'll fish some gizzard shad, but right now we're fishing bluebacks. And I'm averaging 1 to 2 largemouths a trip. And it's kind of funny you say you start out there in 60 foot. So right now I'm kind of setting up in that 40 to 60 foot window out there. And usually it's a long sloping point. And really we're both kind of setting up in the same areas. And basically because it's the baits are there, those fish, they start out there on the end and they just kind of work their way up. But yeah, we're catching some 4 to 6s out there, and I always send my pictures to some of my buddies. I was like, yeah, y'all need this one today. But they're eating bluebacks that I have casted out on a free line. There's no weight, no nothing. And that blueback sometimes he stays on the surface, sometimes he swims down 30 feet. And of course my phone blows every time there's a big tournament up on Murray. I got a handful of bass guys that, hey, where you catching them at? What you been doing? How you catching them? I know you're catching some. And I always, and they don't ever like my September answers. I'm like, yeah, they're out there in like 60 foot of water. Yeah. And they're like, how am I supposed to catch that? I'm like, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, so same deal with us. You said the fish are on the move. Right now I've actually transitioned, in just the last week and a half. So we went from a stationary setup. We've been spot locking, and again, that 40 to 60 foot window, turn a thumper on, or what if some people want a thumper, some people want a splasher. And I tell you what, this would be a good time for me to kind of give my word of advice on that. You hear all these stories about the thumping and stuff, and people say, oh, they fed them at the hatcheries and they beat on the tanks and stuff. You got to remember the DNR, they spawn the fish in April. April, May, they grow them up to they're about an inch long. And they put them in the tank, put them in the lake. And that all takes about a month. So they got these fish for about a month, and then they're putting them in the lake. There's no whole lot of training these fish about thumping on tanks. A fish has a lateral line, just like we do. It's their sense of touch. It's just putting vibrations in the water. That's all these thumpers are doing, is they're putting vibrations in the water. Fish don't know if it's fish feeding, schooling, what they're doing. It's just vibrations in the water. Anyway, so we're setting up in, like I said, 40 to 60 foot of water, throwing a thumper on, throwing a splasher on, and we're literally pitching free lines. We're letting the bait do the work for us. A free line herring, I always tell people, it's swimming, and it's going to swim down to where it's comfortable. It's going to find that water temp that it likes. It's going to find the oxygen level it likes. Well, guess what? That's generally where the fish are too. So we're letting that bait find the fish for us. And that has kind of come, we're still doing it a little bit, But this week I actually transitioned almost into start of an October. I hate to say it for the bass guys, but you're gonna start seeing some planer boards out there. Um, but today on my trip, I actually the whole trip I pulled planer boards today. Even though water temps were up, I pulled. Kind of funny, my clients, I kind of downplayed today. I was like, guys, I said, look, we're going to catch fish. There's going to be a lot of fish schooling around us, but they're going to be small. I'm going to do my best to catch up the big fish. We literally threw the first line out. I turned my back and it took off with a 30-inch striper. I'm just like, and I told him, I said, look, this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. I've had those trips where the first rod goes off and you don't catch another fish the rest of the day.
Right.
Now, Grant, we had some nice fish today. We're pulling the river channel edge. I've actually kind of come up the lake some, not terribly far, around Dreher Island. I'm getting away from the Baum Island, Spence Island, Ballantyne, Beaver Dam areas. We beat them to death lately. Right around Dreher Island, not terribly far up the lake. But these fish have they're working their way up. Water temps have dropped, and they were on their way up the lake, and all of a sudden the water temps came back up and they just stopped. So I've been kind of sitting about upper mid lake, and basically concentrating on the channel edges. I try to tell people, my clients, when they come out here to learn with me, these fish, they use the channels to move up and down the lake. I mean, you find some fish they'll run the flats all the way up the lake, but generally they're using the highway. And I try to relate it to something that they can understand. I said, if I'm driving from here to Myrtle Beach, I'm going to use the interstate. When I want to get off to eat, I'm going to get off that interstate. I'm going to get up on a flat, get into a creek mouth or something like that. I'm going to get off on an exit. The fish are going to get off on the
flat,
the creek
point,
the flat or the mouth of the creeks, anything like that. And that's what they're doing. So they're just traveling up. They're eating on the edges of the channels. Most of the fish we're seeing right now schooling are all 14 to 16. There's some 18s involved in there, but our bigger fish are actually sitting down underneath those fish. And you can see them, and it's so tough to get these fish to bite when they're like that, because they are steadily just opening their mouth and just eating all the droppings that's coming from above them. Mm-hmm. You got thread fins. Then there's probably some herring mixed in with them. That these little 14 to 18-inch fish are just tearing through, and these baits are sinking. That's when a lot of people like to pull the flutter spoons out and stuff. But at the same time, the fish are moving so much, you can't sit on top of them. Especially that you can watch the schooling fish. They'll be sitting on one point, and the next minute they're down 3 or 4 points. And it's the same school. They're just moving that fast. So right now, I'm telling people I have transitioned to a pooling as of this week. I think this is toward the end of September here, we're making this video. But earlier in the month, I was sitting stationary. And I actually just did another video with another guide about this. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. You got to find what works for you. Some people fish stationary all year round. I'm a mover. I like to be moving. The fish are moving. We were talking before we started filming. These fish got tails. Yeah. I mean, if they didn't have tails, they'd sit still and we could catch them.
That's right.
But yeah. So just wrap that up. Fish are starting to move up the lake. Especially, I'd be kind of starting to look around Dreher. Those fish right there, they're going to hang out there for another couple of weeks probably. And then they're going to move on up, and there's going to be another batch that comes in right behind them, and they're going to stop at Dreher. Dreher is a good stopping point for a lot of fish because, that's where the bottleneck is in the lake. Every fish that goes up the lake has to go through the big gap right there.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's a backup there. They go there, and there's a big blockage, and that's when you get some of these fish to peel off into Crystal Lake. They peel off into Hollow Creek, and then a bunch of them eventually make it through the big gap there. It doesn't help that there's always a lot of bait sitting at the big gap. So that kind of holds them sitting there. But yeah, that's on my end of things. Fish are moving up, pull the boards out. Fish are eating shallow, but they're eating shallow over deep water.
Yeah.
So don't think about, okay, well, Chip's pulling boards out there, so I need to get up on the banks. It ain't time to put baits on the banks. You need to put the baits shallow, put the baits shallow over top of deep water.
Yeah.
That's going to be what catches your fish right now.
Yeah. Echo that. I mean, that's spot on. I mean, it shows kind of just how similar these fish are, right? I mean, both striper and bass. I mean, to your point, I mean, some of our bigger fish have been coming out there, right, a little bit deeper. And, you know, it's tough because it's traditional bass fishing tells you, man, I need to go skip a jig under a dock or something like that, try and get a big bite. But it's like, on Lake Murray, man, that's where they are. They live offshore. They're pelagic.
They live. I tell people that all the time. That's, you know, and so much of this revolves around the herring. Goes back to the herring, you know. And you hear people talking about, the striper, the largemouth are running with the stripers. No, they're just chasing the same bait ball. Is what it boils down to. You know, you get these questions. Well, what do I use for bait? People for me like, man, what are you using this? I'm like, using the number one food source in this lake is the blueback herring. There's all kinds of bait that swims in this lake. The blueback herring, there's nothing better than the blueback herring in this lake.
Yeah.
Of course, I know on your all's side, someone says, "Oh, it's a blueback lake." They're like, "Yeah." I mean, it means I can't go beat the docks and beat the banks. You know, you have to go find the bait out there on the points.
Yeah, it's a different lake, right? From traveling the country and doing the Bassmaster stuff, man. Like, you see what bass really are, and then you kind of come back to Lake Murray, and you're like, okay, well, we're striper fishing, kind of, but catching largemouth, right? It's just kind of like a different type of striper fishing. But yeah, I love it. And, you know, this time of the year, you know, you are getting some of that schooling activity, right? Which is awesome. I mean, that's what Lake Murray is known for. If I had to like categorize Lake Murray after all the travels and stuff I've done, and it's the schooling, right? That's what makes this place so awesome is you see the fish schooling. They're actively going after the bait fish, both the stripers and the bass. And a lot of times, especially in the spring too, you can bass fish and you can catch some really good striper. And, you know, it's kind of the same for you. September is just that time of the year, right? It's a transition time. You know, it's a time of, you know, you got to kind of try and stay consistent during a time that's really inconsistent. You know, hopefully today, I mean, you guys have learned a little bit as far as just a starting spot, right? I mean, it's a very intimidating lake when you come and fish it. It's not a super easy lake if you're not a blueback herring fisherman that does it, you know, at least a couple times a month, right? So hopefully, you know, you a common trend that I'm seeing is, you know, those long, slow, tapering points, I mean, for both of these fish. But that's kind of what I've got to say as far as just kind of final closing marks there, you know, for me. I would say, you know, just got to stick with it. Don't get discouraged. The best bite of the day is not until 9 to 1 o'clock. You know, if it's 1 o'clock and you don't have them, I'm not going to say you're cooked, but you're probably not going to have a great bag by the end of the day, right? But, I mean, if you only have 1 or 2 fish and it's 9 or 10 o'clock, that's okay. Like that 3-hour window in kind of that middle part of the day, that's been when the majority of the work and the weight comes into the boat. So stay with it, stay vigilant with it, you'll catch them. You know, just make sure that, you know, you take advantage of those opportunities when they do come up in school. You have to put it on their head. You can't get close to them. Close is not good enough. It's got to be perfect. Throw it right past them about 2 feet, pull it right to where they're heading. Not to where they are, to where they're heading. So if you do that, it'll definitely put an extra fish or 2 in your boat every day, and usually that's the one that matters. So that's what I've got as far as a wrap up from my side. What about you, Chip?
Yeah, and you know, to wrap up on my end, you know, right now you've got to move, and you know, and I guess I should have kind of discussed this a little bit more when I was talking, but we're kind of opposite right now. Our bite is early. Now we can catch our small fish. Our small fish will bite all day long. You know, anytime you want. They're the ones that are schooling that you're seeing. Our big fish bite in the last week is early. If you don't have your big fish by 8 o'clock, you ain't getting none. Right. You're going to be stuck with a bunch of little fish all the rest of the day. And that can change any moment. You know, we're dealing with a daytime moon right now. We should have mentioned that. We got a daytime moon going on. But yeah, just to wrap up on the striper side, you know, it's time to start working up the lake. So don't be shy to come on up the lake a little bit. There's still fish down the lake, but I'm more upper mid. And just to keep moving, pull the boards out, cover ground, get on the edges of the river channel, You can try to get up on some flats a little early for flats, but mainly just stay over top of the river channel on the river channel edges. You want to fish them baits, anywhere from the surface down to about 8 to 10 foot. That's where the bigger fish are kind of coming from right now. Shallow water baits over top of deep water.
Yep. Well, hopefully, guys, that kind of gives you a good starting spot. Definitely somewhere to kind of come and when you come and fish Lake Murray, it gives you a place where, at least you're in the right direction to be able to start fishing. We get a lot of questions about that, especially on the Lake Murray fishing page. Where should I start for largemouth? Where should I start for striper? What are we seeing? So from two people, like I said, that have been on the lake probably more than anybody else for Lake Murray over the last couple of years, that's what we're seeing, and that's kind of how we're approaching it to stay consistent, since that's literally how we make a living, right? So that's what we got for you. If you got any questions, obviously, feel free to DM them to me. We'll address them in the next one. We're going to do another one for October. Hope to keep doing this every month. Hopefully this kind of helps, like I said, include people.
I kind of, this being the first one, I kind of like this. This gives us a chance to get everybody just, kind of involved a little bit. Is this going to go on your it's going to be on your YouTube, right?
Yeah, a link in the description for both of our guide services. Just kind of like, this is where you can go to find us and contact us. And then I'll also go in there and I'll put, that we're going to do this, on a monthly basis, and I don't know as far as the time frame of exactly what day we're going to do it, because, obviously
right.
You're super busy. I'm traveling literally all over the country, but we're going to try and chisel out some time to make sure that we consistently can do this.
And we probably went kind of long today, just trying to get a feel of it.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be good. I mean, and with my end of things, even at so we're kind of doing it here at the end of September. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of giving you a backlog, but going forward, my pattern is going to stay the same for about another month. Your patterns may change up a little bit more than mine do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I can do it almost pretty much any time and relate it to that. But I'm looking forward, especially coming up here soon. There's just so much good fishing about just around the corner. As that water temp drops and fish get shallow, and just it's about ready to get good. Summertime, there'll be a different story when we talk about that. But
that's right. But hey, that's part of it. But yeah, guys, if you would like and subscribe to this video, and obviously this channel, to stay up to date with all the content that me and Chip are going to be putting out. Looking forward to doing this. Hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Feel free to reach out to us. But tight lines from me and tight lines from Chip. Y'all have a good one.
Appreciate it, buddy.